you, Pastor, for that. That was wonderful, and there's a lot to think about. And I was wondering, what do we do? Oh, what do we do when the other party won't participate in disputation? For example, well, as Pastor Poppy said earlier, we invited everyone we could think of who had anything to do with the dispute resolution system to come and defend it. We couldn't get anybody. And you know, other people have, I heard just this morning about somebody's trying to get the 5-2 group to have a disputation with you know, a confessional person, and they won't.
Well, there's stuff. It's a fair question, and what do you do when they won't talk or they won't listen? And I am fond of composing aphorisms. One of my aphorisms I would like you to memorize this morning. To be in fellowship is to argue. To be in fellowship is to argue. Repeat that with me. To be in fellowship is to argue.
I disagree.
Well done. David Price and I are in fellowship with one another. You argue with the people that you recognize as brothers and sisters that you care about. Now, it is certainly true in an apologetic sense that there are times that you will have arguments with those that you are not walking together with, okay? And you are appealing to them. But the fact is, we get exercised about Yankee Stadium and Connecticut precisely because these folks are doing things in our name. We don't go after the Methodists and the Elka much about their aberrations and abominations because they say, well, that's them. They're not going to listen to us. That's not my responsibility. But back to that faithful of the wounds of a friend. I used to say this as a layman when I was on the Board of Elders. I am absolutely convinced, I will say this to you now as an ordained pastor of 6 years, that there are things that I believe that I have in my brain right now about God and the Bible that are wrong. And some of those things are going to come out of my mouth. If you won't confront me with those things and tell me about them and call me to account for that, who will? Your arguing with me is a sign of your love for me, your respect for me, right? You're taking me seriously that way. When our opponents don't want to talk, they don't want to fight, they're either showing a lack of confidence in their own view or a lack of care for us. Now, I will confess to you, one of my recent slogans for myself has been to say the words more often, I'm not going to argue with you. Because as I get older, I'm learning to recognize, are there ears to hear, right? Well, where do those ears to hear come from? Those themselves are gifts. Christ is the one who gives us the ears to hear. Even the ability to recognize my sin and confess it only happens when he's first cut my heart to the quick and the Spirit is at work in my heart. But Romans 1, 18 through 31, study that passage, brothers and sisters. That's what explains society today. 3 times you'll see the refrain. He gave them over. He gave them over. He gave them over. Their foolish minds became darkened. Their hearts become hard. That's what happens to me if you confront me with a sin or an error and I refuse to listen. That's the withdrawal of the Holy Spirit. And let us pray it doesn't happen to us.
Just what Jimmy just asked, when for 6 years the ACELC has brought forward clear statements of God's Word, and we have tried to engage in dialogue with the Synod, but the Synod simply refuses to engage. and instead addresses us with nothing but silence and indifference, where do we go?
We don't go elsewhere. We recognize that we are in this synodical relationship by our own free choice. You are always free to go elsewhere. But the fact is that we're in this synod, and we are not being forbidden to speak the truth. And as long as we are not being forbidden to speak the truth, we can and must remain. And in fact, we can and must ensure that when we are disciplined, when we are silenced, it is because we are speaking the word of God. We are speaking the word of Christ. If I am being disciplined for the unkindness, the impatience, the lack of gentleness of the sinner named Paul Nuss, I need to heed that rebuke and repent and turn. But it's incumbent upon me to do my best to make sure that when and where I am being persecuted and silenced, it is because it is truly Christ who is being persecuted and silenced, so that it will be evident when we are muzzled and cast out that it is Christ who is being rejected. Now, my way of expressing what you are asking about, Dick, is, I call it the problem of the disappearing hyphen. The hyphen, yeah, that little jot that connects the Lutheran Church, notice where the definite article is, and Missouri Synod. Okay? There's that little hyphen in between those two. Okay? Question. Where do you want to be? Which side do you want to be stuck on if that hyphen disappears? If that bridge is gone? All right. Now, again, I had this written into the paper. I took it out for the sake of time. But don't be so quick to say the Lutheran Church, because the Lutheran Church, in some ways, you could say, is an abstraction. Now, Walther called it the true visible church on earth, but he acknowledged that amidst that church, there are many false confessors. I have found, as I've traveled, that those churches which prominently display Missouri Synod are more likely to bear the theology that I recognize than those who simply identify themselves as Lutheran. Right? The particularity matters. And in fact, those who don't even use the word Lutheran, well, they're making another confession, aren't they? And I used to be really grumpy about that. They're in the Missouri Synod. They should say that they're Lutheran. I'm not anymore. I'm thankful that those people are not falsely advertising who they are. We've got way too many people out there who've got that name out in front on the sign, Missouri Synod, and we go inside and the stuff in the can doesn't match the label outside. Those are the people we're going to have the argument with. So where do we go? You come here. You go to your Circuit Winkle. You go to your pastor's conference.
In seminary, I took a class on LCMS history, and I was really impressed at how Walter and our fathers, whenever there was any controversy in the synod, their immediate answer was to do some kind of convention where there would be disputation. I'm thinking of like the predestination controversy, for example, where they would discuss it until either everyone walked away in agreement or we decided we can all be in fellowship. And I remember asking, really being blown away by this. Oh, this is an interesting concept. And asking my professor, well, why aren't we doing that today? He didn't have an answer for me, but I appreciate you showing me in your paper that it wasn't just Walter, it was also Luther and the other Lutheran fathers who practiced this way. So thank you for that. My question, I guess, is it seems to me that there's always two temptations when it comes to disputation. The one, which we've heard several times, is, of course, not to have the disputation at all, do everything you can to avoid it. I want to pretend that we agree and get along. But the other, I suppose, would be when having the disputation, concluding too early in the disputation that you must be the one who is right, or that the other person is, too far gone, and cutting the disputation short, and walking away saying, "Well, I did my job. I talked to my brother, so you can't blame me." I'm curious to know if Luther and the faculty at Wittenberg, and maybe Walther too, maybe. If they had any helpful policies or practices during these disputations, any sort of policy that said, the disputation will continue on for this long, or there will be so many disputations, to kind of help avoid both errors, and to, on the one hand, make sure that the disputation goes on long enough that error can be corrected and unity can be accomplished, but at the same time, you don't want the disputation to go on and on and on, and now you're just, it's clear that you're in disagreement, you're not going anywhere, but you're not doing anything about it. So I'm curious to know if there was any sort of policy or tradition in either time periods that set, if they had any way of determining, saying, hey, we're going to dispute, but we'll know when the disputation is going as far as it can go at this point.
Yes. There were policies and procedures. There were defined time limits, and it was the job of the convening authority who presided at the disputation to set up those rules, to put, in a sense, the jury together who would decide. But these things were public spectacles. Now, I draw your attention to, if you've ever had a chance, you can tune in on some cable channels and watch the British House of Commons, okay? That is the closest thing maybe you can see today toward classical disputation, where people are up and they're giving it to each other, and people are whistling and cheering, and they're booing and they're stomping their feet. That's how it was in Luther's day with the students, and probably back even at the University of Paris. It was a gladiatorial combat, and people were cheering and whistling, but people were won over, okay? Now, there was a time period. One example maybe of what you're getting at would be the way Luther was going after the antinomians. He conducted a series of disputations to try to keep going at the topic because he felt he wasn't really getting at Agricola and some of the others who were taking a wrong view. He was using the device of the disputation repeatedly to go at that, okay? But again, in a sense, I'd like you to take my paper as an invitation. We all, myself most of all perhaps, need to learn more about this. How were these things actually done and run? I was the elected president of the Student Association my last year at the seminary, and we introduced, with my friend Pastor David Ramirez, student disputations back into the habitus of the seminary, and that became something they would hold a few of and organize and try to go at that. Now again, many of you have been watching presidential debates, right, on TV, and there's a lot of discussion about, well, okay, what are these things really worthwhile or not? You know very well that a lot of that is just playing to the camera, searching for that gotcha moment, that sound bite, which really kind of fits with what Pastor Kilps just said to us a little bit ago. That can happen inside the synodical process as well. Are we really seeking to be united in the truth here, or are we simply seeking to score points? That, in a sense, was the fundamental distinction between Socrates and the sophists. The sophists were simply trying to score points stylistically. Socrates said, no, there is such a thing as absolute truth, And we're all working toward that, and he was willing to modify his own views in the course of the discussion. So there's a whole field of study on the details of how that can best be conducted. And of course, you took away from my presentation that this requires this whole underneath the iceberg of prior work to memorize, to learn the rules of logic, which we're not taught anymore, about logical fallacies and how one makes these arguments, ethical arguments, pathos arguments, logos arguments. That needs to be taught in our schools again. When I leave this conference, I'll be going to a retreat for the Wittenberg Academy, which I'm affiliated with up in Iowa, that is seeking to reintroduce this very thing into the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Pastor Jason Bratton, for example, is teaching classes on classical logic that you and your children can sign up and take through the Wittenberg Academy. Dr. James Tallman, who is currently the headmaster of the school at the church where I will be going, Trinity in Cheyenne, Wyoming, as a professor of rhetoric. He's taught some excellent classes on it. We need to learn this again. We need to rediscover it. Another point on duration I didn't mention in the paper. For those, David, who were qualifying for doctorates in those days at University of Wittenberg at Paris, your final examination consisted of a 12-hour, actually an 11-hour disputation. You started at 5 in the morning, and you stood on a public platform, and you took all comers until 5 in the evening with 1 hour break for lunch. And you defended yourself against any and all who came. And only when you were adjudged by the jury that was watching and the crowd were you determined to be qualified to be a doctor of the church.
Just really, too, it's an exercise. It's an exercise of the mind. It's not necessarily to establish the truth of the final authority. It's an exercise so that when you go out, you're better able to talk theology. The problem today is we don't have the ability to talk theology. Right? We don't have the ability. With what you're proposing, we would have the ability to do that. We're not saying we agree on everything, within a certain amount of time. We're just saying we'd be able to talk.
Well, again, so much of this is about finding a false premise, okay? And in a sense, my whole paper could be summarized as there's a false premise behind the whole dispute resolution process, which is that disputes are bad and we need to get rid of them. No, disputes are essential. We need more disputes. Talk to marriage counselors about people who have healthy relationships, and they will tell you that you Norwegians and Swedes and Danes with your can't we all get along Minnesota nice have got bigger problems in your marriages than, those Donald Trump, New York aggressive Jews and Greeks and Italians that are breaking plates and throwing things at each other. They have a healthier relationship because they work it out and the storm passes and it's done.
In your paper, you draw a distinction between debate, which appeals to emotion or ethics, and disputation, which is logos, reason, right? And, your paper is encouraging me towards something that I'm worried we don't have the ability to do, right? However, we do.
Well, we've lost it and we can regain it. That's my point.
That's where I'm heading with my question. And we do theology in 140 character statements. We don't know how to follow it up.
I'll take that as a confession of sin. I have also sinned in that area. Absolvate. That's Twitter for the rest of you.
However, I'm hopeful because if there's a slow drip solution to this, it is in the catechetical method and the role of the Lutheran school. Because we can form and we can teach those. You talk about the little kids who love to memorize and love to learn, and you went in this direction about my question. But would you agree that it's not? The goal then is less about surmountable resolutions as it is to teach where we have the opportunity.
Right. We all need, and we learn from each other. We all need to argue. That was that statement that Pelican made from that second council, that each of us needs the brother to learn the truth. Think about how we had as a standard, at the end of catechesis, before confirmation, you had a public examination, which was what? Really, it was intended to be an opportunity for disputation. That's how I frame it. I put my kids up. Confirmation is all law. There's no gospel in it. So I make it crushing law. I invite any kids, especially their brothers and sisters who've already been confirmed, to show up and ask them any question they want.
Here's the main point that I think what we need to learn to do. We need to learn to articulate our opponent's our opponent's argument to our opponent's satisfaction, so that our opponent can say to us, "Thank you, I could have said it better myself." When you start there, I've been persuaded. I'm a very opinionated person, but I've changed my opinion many times because of that rule. If somebody can show to me that that person knows exactly what I'm saying, we have a confidence there, and we can then continue to discuss. I'm afraid, I think a lot of our experiences on the internet, unfortunately, as you kind of were talking about Twitter or wherever, where you have people just dropping bombshells. But if we could establish a platform, maybe you and Pastor Robin can work on that, for actually having a real dispute or disputation like in the past, I think that would do a lot of good for the church. I really do.
Well, tying that together with the previous question, you noted the distinction between debate and disputation. In a sense, disputation then is a more formalized segment of the broader debate, because it's not as though ethos and pathos don't belong. We are emotional creatures. God made us that way. God has emotions. So we should recognize that, but we shouldn't allow it to trump the rational. Then to your point, this was one of the things. I took a class in St. Aquinas at the Fort Wayne Seminary with Pastor Ramirez. I came away with the opinion that St. Thomas Aquinas was about 80% Lutheran in a lot of his thinking. He was well before the Council of Trent, hardened a lot of stuff. He was largely with us in the Scriptures, for example. There were certainly some big errors there. But he was known for this. He was legendary for this, for laying out in his Summa Theologica the arguments of the opponent, so that by the time you're done reading the arguments of his opponent, you're saying, I don't know what he's going to say. I mean, he's made the case. This is done. The opponent would say about Thomas Aquinas, he was the master. He made the argument of the opponents better than the opponent ever did. And then he proceeded to dismantle and demolish them because he understood them well. Again, there's a cliche. You've all heard it. Many cliches do contain a nugget of truth. I'll say it here. They don't care what you know before they know what you care, okay? So by showing that you're listening, that you've heard and understand their point of view, that you understand their arguments, their reason for making the arguments, you're winning the hearing for them to reciprocate. I fail at this all the time.
Pastor, thank you very much. I would never accuse you of plagiarism or anything like that, but you do realize that your call for theological disputation has been being sounded for at least the last 2 years. Like Herman Otten in Christian News. And whether you love him or hate him,
I love it.
he has been calling for theological debates and theological disputations on the disputed matters in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, to get these things out in the open. No more smoky room, secretive stuff. Get it out, let the people of the church, pastors and lay people together. And I gotta tell you, he's spot on, and I agree that we need to do this again. When we have in our free conferences here with the ACELC, we really struggled with this because we want to confess the truth, and then when we do, we get accused of preaching to the choir. And if we try to invite others to present the other side of the issue or the other side of the topic. Either we get ignored, or we feel guilty because it seems like we're giving a podium or a stage to error. So in this process of theological debate and theological disputation, how can we not feel guilty about giving an even louder voice to the error that exists among us?
I can't fix your feelings. They may be accurate. You may, in fact, be guilty of doing that. What I would say to you, though, is there is forgiveness for that guilt when you are seeking to bring the truth to light and reconcile with the brother. I think it's understood and expected that a forum like this, I mean, Bill Kilps talked about being a Gentile among the Jews. You are a very Orthodox Jew among our midst, Bill. I recognize you as such that way. So this was a presentation from a friend here who's working within the system, and it was good to have him do that. We do have many confessional brothers who just quit going to their winkles, who don't go to the pastors' conferences, and believe me, I understand that, I get that. I've been blessed with being in a great circuit, and I'm going to one that, if possible, may even be better. I'm going to be the liberal squish in my circuit. But the fact is, we do have to try to figure out how to engage this. Now, again, another big bureaucratic process. First Vice President Herb Miller has tried to get disagreeing districts and others to engage through this whole koinonia process. And ironically, this bureaucratic process is probably doing as much to disrupt koinonia, or perhaps one might say highlight the koinonia that's not there, than it is to bring it about. But we do have to agree on the points of disagreement. That's where things have to start. Another verse I didn't put in my paper, but I'd be remiss not to mention it. Romans 16, verse 7. Mark and avoid. Now, mark in that case did not mean spray paint, like the orange tree, X on the tree to be cut down. But it did mean mark, kind of like that movie Predator. You've seen it, with that red laser pointer right on the forehead. This is where the bullet is coming, okay? You have to identify the target in order to admonish the person over and over and over again. And of course, we expect that others will do this to us as well. So you may feel guilty about not doing it well. And I'm sure, to some extent, after every disputation, Luther and the disputants got together and said, here were the good points, here were the bad points, here's how we do it better next time. That's essential to the United States military, is that after-action report, lessons learned, so that we learn as we go along. And we can certainly do that in the church militant too.